What's the best order to go through things in a plea and mitigation?
Personally, I don't think there is a right or wrong order. As a rule, I try and deal with the negative bits first and end on the positive bits, but sometimes you can't do that. And I think it depends on the case. Sometimes you have to bring out the client's personal circumstances. Sometimes you have to deal with some of the technical issues. For example, why has your client pleaded guilty at a later stage? Or what issues have there been on the way to the sentence? And so I think that as an overall rule, probably I will try and start with the negative stuff and end on the positive stuff. But each case, I think, turns on its own, on its own facts. I think the main thing in the plea and mitigation is to have your list of topics. So, the things that you want to cover. You don't necessarily write it out, but you need your tick box list that I always have in every plea and mitigation. And that is, when did the client enter a guilty plea? What are the sentencing guidelines? And from the sentencing guidelines, what are the positive and the negative points about it? Client's personal circumstances, how that affects the case at hand. Why the judge should depart from the guidelines if that's the case. Sometimes it's technical, and sometimes you're pulling on the judge's heartstrings if they've got any. Lots of judges don't have them, it would appear. But I think you will, with experience, as other people have said, you'll get to know which judges and which magistrates are interested in different bits. Some judges don't want to hear the negative things because they know them already. They're set out by the prosecution. They're set out in the pre-sentence report, and they just want you to get to the, to the case in point. The only other thing that I would say, and this might be touching on a question that I think was put about reading a judge or subtle clues from a judge's body language. If you stand up with your plea and mitigation all nicely read out and the judge says, thank you, you don't have to address me, or I've looked at the pre-sentence report and I agree with the recommendation, or will you focus on this? As I said right at the very beginning, listen to what the judge is saying. I have seen people turn a relatively good situation into a relatively bad situation by dealing with something that the judge didn't want to be dealt with. And that's something that comes from listening as well as your preparation.
I agree with Carl. The judge is sometimes asking you as the advocate something to assist him in passing the right sentence, and where he asks a question as to a particular problem that he may have seen in the pre-sentence report, or something about the facts, then you must deal with that. Don't go to your standard mitigation, although you always have to start with the obvious about what the judge has in terms of the papers, the plea of guilty, when it was, is there a pre-sentence report, is there any other reports, are there any references, testimonials, so all those things that you deal with. But then when a judge asks you a question, you must answer it. And sometimes, like Carl says, I've looked at it, there's this particular part of the pre-sentence report, and I'm thinking about following that. And then you address him specifically in relation to that part. Then you don't even, in fact, you don't even need to address him about the rest.